sisters.
Hello, everybody. Hi. Ooh, it's a lively crowd. It's going to be a good time, guys. My name is Kim Heil. I'm the artistic producer and head of casting for the Old Globe. This is the Insight Seminar for Crime and Punishment, a comedy.
Woohoo!
See, you get a laugh just from the title. It was brilliant. Brilliant. I would like to recognize Carl and Vicki Zeiger if they're here. They're not here. Okay, that's okay, but I would like to thank them for their sponsorship of this program, which we've had for years. Yes. So, to my left, I have these esteemed guests with me here on the stage. I'm going to say a few words about them.
Gordon. My name is Steve.
Gordon Greenberg, you all probably know because he has directed here at the Old Globe many times before, including our long-running holiday show, Scrooge's Big San Diego Christmas Show. And then he also directed The Heart of Rock and Roll, the Huey Lewis musical. And then, what am I forgetting? Working. Do you guys remember Working? This was yes, it was really good. I love that Working. Yeah. Stats Turkle. And he's also, now I have to read Gordon, excuse me. He also recently worked on a new musical called Picasso, starring Antonio Banderas. Name drop. And was a co-writer with Stephen Schwartz and Kardashev, and also is a co-creator of Most Talkative, which is a show on NBC Universal. He recently directed Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf at Geffen Playhouse, Geisel starring Rebel Wilson at the Savoy Theatre in London, and he got 6 Olivier Award nominations. Congrats for that. And all sorts of other really shiny titles that I will let you read about in the program. Because now I want to talk about Steve, his co-writer.
I'm so much less impressive. This is going to be. You really should have started with me.
Alphabetical order.
I saw Antonio Banderas in a play once. He was very good.
This was non-preferential alphabetical billing. So.
Understood.
So Steve is also a co-writer of Ebenezer Scrooge's Big San Diego Christmas Show. He is a co-writer on The Griswolds' Broadway Vacation, The Other Josh Cohen, and The Secret of My Success, and a show that we'll be hopefully hearing more about called Dracula, a Comedy of Terrors. He's won a ton of awards. Jeez Louise, Steve.
Nope. Nominated for a ton of awards. I have won 0.
Award.
I have lost every one.
I skipped the nominations part. I went straight to the award names. You're a Tisch alum, as am I.
Hey, what's up?
And he's also an actor, which is why actors are just, portrayed so well in your shows because they're so happy to work with other actors.
For sure.
You know what it's like. Anyway, please welcome Gordon Greenberg, Steve Rosen. As you can imagine, I'm very giddy right now because of these two gentlemen who've since become my friends. And so I'm really happy to be up here with them. And also, if you've seen their shows, you'll know why. You cannot help but smile and laugh and giggle. If you've seen Scrooge, the style of Scrooge is just, I would call it, madcap and crazy. And I mean, it is a comedy, but they also still manage to keep the heart of the story, and the storytelling is still very pure in their shows. And so it takes a lot of skill to do that. So I would love to start off by saying, how did this happen? Was this like a Match.com? What was this?
Well, we actually first met when I was working at Ars Nova, which is a small sort of incubator in New York on like 54th Street, all the way west, where Natasha Pierre and the Great Comet started there. It's sort of like where downtown comes uptown, and they had asked me to just program a series spotlighting people who had extraordinary talent and were starring in Broadway shows.
None of them were available.
But this was the beginning. This was literally Idina Menzel pre-Wicked. She did one, and Megan Hilty, and just all these wonderful people that you see on Broadway, and you're like, that person's amazing. I wonder what they're like doing their own material. What is their dream to communicate? And so I asked Steve, what do you want to do? And he came in and did a hilarious comedy show. And then from that moment on, I just thought, that's someone I want to work with. And he can tell you more about it. But we also found just a synergy and a complementary aesthetics that I thought went well together, and a shared sort of context experience. We both have fathers who are children's dentists. I don't know. It's very compelling. But there were a lot of jokes in there.
Yeah, we have it's similar. So we came from similar backgrounds, but yeah, Gordon is in the business in New York. He's known as being sort of a connector and a person who sort of never says no to something that seems impossible. Not to jobs. I mean, you say no to jobs, but you can't say no to like if someone poses something that seems somewhat impossible. Gordon is the kind of person that says, well, let's try it. Let's see how it goes. And I am drawn to those people, like, as we say in the show, like a moth to a cardigan. And I feel like that he... so Gordon encouraged me really for the first time in New York to bring my own creative, because I had been working only really as an actor at that point. I'd done some sketch comedy in college that I had written, but Gordon basically said, you are good and you deserve a chance to show what you can do, and challenged me essentially to create this show. And from that, basically all of the good things in my life and career have flowed from there. We've become very good friends, and getting to work and write together is both challenging and fun and creating new things, but also a great excuse to hang out with a friend. And yeah, like you said, similar aesthetic and similar background, and he's been like a very important, slightly older brother to me in this business. And so...
Okay, so walk me through this, because, sometimes that kind of synergy is very rare. But so you meet, you decide this is someone that, I want to work with. I know A Christmas Carol. Like, how did that happen?
I forgot. So yeah, there's a place outside of New York called the Bucks County Playhouse that was started by like Moss Hart in the 1930s, I want to say, and then it went dark during the war, World War II, and then came back. And they
Grace Kelly made her stage debut there.
Yeah, Grace Kelly, Angela Lansbury, illustrious, old school summer stock, very East Coast of a time. And they had said, will you do a Christmas show? Because I wrote and directed the show called Holiday Inn on Broadway a few years ago, this Irving Berlin thing. And so all of a sudden they thought, oh, he's a Christmas guy. But I said, oh, okay.
Greenberg, that sounds like Christmas to me.
Makes perfect sense. But Irving Berlin, same thing. But and I do love it, as only a Jew can love Christmas. I don't have to deal with the complications of everything. But it's they said pick any show, and then I said, well, can I just write one? Can I just create one? How hard can that be? And then I asked Steve, and we kind of literally like read it again. Distilled it down to its essence and came up with an idea, because Bucks County is named after Buckinghamshire in England, and we thought, what if Scrooge immigrated from Buckinghamshire to Bucks County to run this mill that used to be on the side of the theater? And that was the first version of it. Barry came and saw it at some point, and he said, I think you could do even better with this show, and can you do it for us? And we did our first draft, and he said, it looks like you just read a Wikipedia page about San Diego. And I said, we did. We read a Wikipedia page. And he was like, well, maybe talk to Danielle, our dramaturg, and let's get a little deeper into it. And so we did, and then came up with the show that you now see. But it was a few iterations that led us to kind of fine-tuning so that the rhythms are right and the laughs are right, and the spirit of the show is both buoyant and silly, but heartfelt and true and soulful. And I think we have a really lovely cast, and we will have another really lovely cast for this year. It's always hard to get actors to leave their families for the holidays if they're coming from New York, so that's always a thing. But I loved making it, and I loved spending time here, obviously. And when Barry said, we'd love for you to do another show, we'll commission it, look for something that is a literary classic, i.e. public domain. So we go to Barnes & Noble and look at all that shelf. And Treasure Island's been done, and The Count of Monte Cristo's been done. And
we're not really Bronte guys.
And then Steve said, let's look for the most serious piece of literature we can find, because that's going to be the funniest. Right? Anyone who takes themselves really seriously is so easy to send up. It's like, if you laugh at yourself first, no one's going to laugh. So we were like, who does not laugh at himself? And Dostoevsky. It's really intense. But at the heart of it, we also saw something that lived on, and that spoke to, I thought, a truth about humankind that survives to today and is very present in, if you've been watching some of these TV shows about tech sort of giants who kind of, Icarus flew too close to the sun, got too crazy, like We Crashed, or like the one about the Uber guy, or Elizabeth Holmes from Theranos, the blood testing. There was, for a minute, there were 10 shows like that, and I became fascinated by them independently, and then I kind of made the connection in my head. I suddenly understood, this is the same thing. This is a guy who sets out with a really noble goal, and the intention to make his family's life better and to make the world better for people like him. And little by little, he is diminished and degraded and disempowered, and he keeps making more and more questionable decisions until he finds himself turned upside down without realizing it, and in a really difficult spot, and committing a crime not dissimilar to the one in the book. We don't use an axe, but we kind of take an analogous situation and riff on what was there. And we did try to give it just a little more resonance today so that you understood the pull on this guy. And let's just say it involves student loans.
Yeah, there's an amazing line in the book that I think also resonated with us, that most people would prefer a convenient lie over an inconvenient truth, and I think that that's something that really resonates, especially with these tech companies, like you were saying, and Theranos, and all these people who are just keeps telling you it's true, it's true, it's true. If I keep saying it, eventually it's going to be true and it's going to be right, and that is something that we can both take a look at from a dramatist perspective, but also poke a great deal of fun at, because it does have a modern relation. It does feel contemporary in that way, as all of these great classic works do. There's reasons why we still read them today. Thematically, they understand human beings and human behavior in a way that have made them, stand the test of time. So we dug into this story, and we got we sort of got up to speed on it, because it is a lot to sort of wrap your brain around. And then we sort of had to figure out. And I will say, one of the greatest things about, my favorite things about working with Gordon is that not only is he an amazing writer and a brilliant person, he's also one of the greatest directors I've ever met in my life. And when we're writing it, I met Mike Nichols. You're very good too. But when we're writing it, we can write in a way where we now understand how it's going to be staged. And so from a writing standpoint, you sort of skip a couple of drafts that way, because you can sort of figure out when you're writing what is going to be physically possible and what isn't going to be physically possible. And Gordon is always willing to push the envelope to see, how quickly could that person make a costume change? I bet we could do it in 5 seconds,
It helps that we know the space so well, and sometimes it's almost a limitation that part of me is a director, part of me is a producer, and I'm like, well, we'll use the snow boxes from Scrooge, and that'll be the ash, and then we'll use and you just start thinking too far ahead. But I do try to partition so that when we're writing, I'm just a writer, and I'm like, the director will figure it out. And then once we get into rehearsals, and I'm like, what? This doesn't make sense. And it truly, I do like sometimes ask myself, like, how did I think I could do that? But it's a good thing. Generally, I think when you read a script, if you're a creator of theater and you have no idea how you're going to accomplish it, the result will be more theatrical, more interesting, less expected, and right, the currency of all this is surprise, and showing us something we maybe don't think about every day. So I want to set us up for that, even though it's harder and it makes your brain hurt and you can't just go to YouTube and find the solution. It's generally more rewarding.
It's pretty cool to watch him do it too. He's really good.
Now, did you guys have to actually reread the book?
I mean, can I just say, at
long.
Stanford freshman year, they assigned us the Peloponnesian Wars. And it's a lot of pages. And I had a lot of classes, and I discovered the Spark Notes. So, yes, we read passages. We did not read the entire thing. We did read through, obviously, the Spark Notes and all the commentary and chunks of it where we wanted to get deeper into Dostoevsky's mind. And in some ways, it's more helpful. Interestingly, I mean, I discovered that when I first adapted Holiday Inn, it was for Universal, and they're a big studio, and they started off saying, just put the movie on stage. That's all we want. That never works. It never works. It's a different animal, and nobody really wants to see the movie. You think you do, but you want to see the essence of it. You want to see the promise of the premise, but better. And so I watched it once, made notes, and never went back to it again. And we kind of did that with the book. We kind of did our research, the forensics on it. Here are the things that stand out to us. Here are the characters that we want to keep, and now let's write another story, which sort of spares you the overcomplication or the over fealty to the original, so that you understand you're free. Like this is our commentary, our reflection of how we see this novel now, and it will. It's silly. Hopefully, it's moving in places for the very same core reasons that the novel is. Dostoevsky was a great psychiatrist and a great understander of how we think and how we make moral compromises, and how people, just like in working, which was ultimately about no matter what job you do, it becomes the most important thing in the world, or an important thing, because it's such a huge part of your life. So you place value in every weld that you make if you're a construction worker, or every patient you see if you're a doctor, or when we're making a play. It's the most important thing, and it's such a joy and a privilege to, for 4 weeks, not think about the outside world much, that this becomes everything. And in the same way, I think often when you're making choices in life that may have benefits and costs and even some collateral damage, people figure out how to live with that and to make ourselves okay with the cost to the gains that we get in exchange, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and that analysis, and we read a lot of analyses about the piece, in the same way that you can maybe in weird ways learn more about even the Bible by reading about what people say about it than actually reading the text itself. There's so much that's open for interpretation, but when you read several people what they have to say about the work and what the themes are, that and Classics Illustrated also very helpful in the process. But
I know it is interesting, because in some ways it's like what you want is the distilled version, so that then you can put flesh back on the skeleton yourself and figure out what that is. It would be, I think, a very different version, and I'm sure that it exists somewhere where someone took the book and put the actual book with the pawnbroker and the axe, and Dunya's a prostitute who's also
Sonia's a prostitute.
Sonia's a prostitute who's also a nun.
No. She's got the alcoholic father who died. Yeah, I mean, so that's the other thing too, is that like it's a long book, and that's mostly just names. Everybody's name. Everyone's got 5 names, and some of them have the same second name, third name, and then and also like when you get to the root of the whole thing, to make it a comedy, it's got to fly. And when you know too much, it's almost like, how do you fit all of this in? So it almost makes it easier, as you said, to distill it down.
It sounds like there are some people here who have actually read the book. I do have a question about your writing process. So you decide we're going to work on Crime and Punishment. Do you say you take the first act or the first scene with, Rhodey and how do you decide who does what?
We're generally in the same room most of the time we're writing, or on Zoom together, as opposed to
1.5 years notwithstanding when we weren't in the same room.
But as opposed to, I have other, on TV projects, frequently I'll go back and forth, and I'll write this scene, you write the next one, and then we deal with that. But Steve and I think, particularly for this kind of ensemble comedy that hopefully feels like it was created by a theater troupe, we also kind of tend to hire the same actors over and over, or people that have a similar sensibility. And I think it's important that we're in the room so we can really act it out for each other, see if it makes each other laugh. And we start by making the skeleton, which is the outline, and that takes a long time, a surprisingly long time, because when the bones are in alignment, when it makes sense. Including ideas that you want to sort of lay pipe for at the beginning and make payoff later, and you're planning a lot of strands. So once you have that done, I think of it like building a house, and you have to first be the architect that figures out where the bearing walls are, and then later someone comes in and you write the dialogue, and that's the wallpaper and the Sub-Zero fridge and all the nice things to make your house pretty. But this is what I think is the crucial part of the process, and very hard to go backwards on, because once you've put all the flesh on the bone and given the character's life, to get back under the hood and retool the walls it's not impossible, but it's a big challenge, particularly on a musical, where I'm sure you guys have seen, once a musical becomes a giant machine, it's so hard to go back and change the structure. But these function in some ways like musicals, in that they do have that same buoyancy and that same rhythm and forward movement and propulsion, and there are even moments where speeches happen that we call arias. This is her moment to shine, let her have this ballad, and it's just a beautiful speech, because the way you process information is kind of like watching a movie. When there's a close-up on someone, that becomes, in theater, either a speech, a soliloquy, in a musical, a ballad usually, and you're sort of getting into their head and heart in a way that you can't if everything is still at a clip.
And that's not to say that we haven't made changes even in the past 4 days since our final dress rehearsal. Even today. Yeah, we are, and that's one of the amazing things about working at the Old Globe specifically, is the support that this theater gives to artists, not only in the creative process of building the show, but even once we're here, giving thoughts, telling us what is reading and what isn't, and we trust their big, beautiful brains so much. They have seen so much theater. They can come into things with fresh baby eyes and see something as if they haven't seen it before. And the challenge is, even we got some notes from the final dress rehearsal that really helped us with one character, especially, just in meeting one character. It's like, the entrance, we could work on that first couple of lines, and it's made a world of difference, I think, to the character, and the performer has really taken the reins and run with it.
So if you're seeing it tonight, just know that the interesting thing is it's a bit of a higher, a tightrope walk for them, because there are new things, and literally we write down everything that's changed during the 4 or 5 hour rehearsal. So there's a change here, there's a change in the blocking, this is a new line, this is a new moment, he's playing this part instead tonight, and they have it placed on their dressing room tables, and they just sort of go through, and it's a 90-minute marathon, so they're just on stage.
No chance to go back and look at that paper once the thing starts. You got to remember, and you got to remember to forget what you used to remember.
Yeah, you think it's hard being a passenger in Passengers? It's a lot. Have you seen Passengers? Isn't it great?
They're amazing.
Yeah, we love the Passengers.
My back hurt just watching that show. My gosh.
So okay, so I've seen you guys work in action, obviously. You know, we developed this last year, and
Yes, I should say we've done 2 readings here, 2 one-week readings, one with the MFA students, which was great, and one with some of the same cast members. One of the same cast members. And one very quick one on Zoom during the pandemic. That was like the first ever one. Yeah.
that's right. And the thing that I always enjoy is that I just always know I'm going to laugh, right? I always know that the humor is going to resonate with me. I think that's why we get along so well, because you make me laugh. How do you make things funny? They say comedy is harder than drama, and I believe it because I don't understand why something's funny. Can you tell me why something's funny?
Kim, have you heard of something called self-loathing? No, I mean
Never.
it's what makes us laugh. I think that really it's having a friend or someone that you can bounce things off of, that you've got a friendly, bouncy relationship with. Everyone has those friends that you just sort of get together and gab with. We're those kinds of people, and so I think that a lot of it is taking our relationship and our friendship and sort of translating it into these characters, and also the stuff that makes us laugh. We were raised, we like a lot of the same stuff, but we also like different stuff in terms of like where our comic tastes lie. And I think that it's fun to put those things together, because there's certain things that Gordon comes up with that I could never in a million years think of as so funny, and then really the bathroom jokes he could never come up with because he's far too sophisticated.
I think that you also have to be willing to be unfunny to be funny. It's like I always say to actors before you start a process, you have to first understand and admit that you're not going to be perfect before you can be good. And so making mistakes and just being unafraid of being wrong and silly and stupid will ultimately get you to a place where it's better and better and better, and trying to take your ego out of it. And that really is what's at the core of, I think, this writing partnership, is that I think we both have enough respect for each other and understanding that we're going to get there eventually, that it's okay if we just go, no.
Yeah,
no.
It doesn't work. That didn't work well. That fell on its face. You know,
Yeah.
it's that kind of thing.
Without taking it personally.
Do you have moments, I mean, you mentioned that you work with some actors again and again, and do you have moments with some of your ensemble where you're like, or they do something that is incredibly funny that you didn't think of, that you're like, oh, I think I'm going to write that in?
Yeah, I mean, Orville, who you'll see in the show, he's been in Scrooge for the last few years, and he was in Heart of Rock and Roll, the Huey Lewis, and last year he did a Shakespeare. I forget which one.
Did Taming of the Shrew, I
Yeah.
say.
Anyway, he's terrific. He's a really wonderful actor, and he knows us so well that he sometimes is almost too quick to like jump to what he thinks it is, but it's very helpful. He's like, I think this is what you want, Gordon, and I'm always like, yeah, great, thanks. Why don't you finish the day? But I welcome it. It's so fortunate to have people like that you trust and that trust you, and that it's just such a good feeling. It really is fortunate, like, to be able to work with people who make each other laugh and who want to accomplish the same goal.
And there's very little ego. It really is the best idea wins. So if someone comes up with something that's really funny and creative, and they're willing to let us put it in the show, then it goes in.
No writing credit necessary.
No, but they get a nickel.
To be paid later.
So how do you find, okay, so we talked about how you found Crime and Punishment. Do you often, like, in your conversations, are you like, oh my gosh, Last of the Mohicans, let's do it? Do you come up with ideas like that you're like, hey, Steve?
All the time. I mean, I come up every day. I'm like, oh, this would be fun to work on. That would be fun to work on. Because I'm one of those like people that if I go to a new city, I look at real estate because I'm like, I want to move here. I can just really quickly fall in love with something or an idea. And I think Steve has a similar proclivity, so sometimes he'll send me an idea or I'll send him, and it takes 20 before we land on something that we're like, let's give it a shot, and then we see if we can find the rights or find someone who wants to support it, and that's it dwindles from there, and then you finally get to the Old Globe and Barry likes this and let's do it, or Bucks County or Chicago Shakes or wherever we are working. Dracula, which is opening in New York this fall, was actually commissioned by a theater in Florida that a million years ago it's so campy. It used to be the Burt Reynolds dinner theater. Literally, like it had like the Lonnie Anderson suite and the Dom DeLuise room.
But now it is a big, beautiful,
Yeah.
multi-million-dollar theater called the Maltz Jupiter.
Yeah, it's really fun. I mean, one of our old friends who, when he was a kid, he was a waiter there when it was a dinner theater, and he always swore, one day I'll come back and make this place great. And he did, and he removed the roast beef and he left the theater. And now it's a big, sort of estimable theater with a big budget and a desire to kind of join the ranks of theaters like the Globe. It's not recognized quite at this level yet, but they do have great resources. And so he said, I love what you've done at the Globe with Scrooge. What about doing something like that with Dracula? And we jumped on it, and we thought that's a great idea. And we worked on it there, and we worked on it then at Chicago Shakes, which is dramaturgically wonderful, and then we did it at Capitol Rep in New York, and then we did it up in Canada and Montreal, and now we're finally doing it at New World Stages off Broadway. But it took all of those iterations to make something. In some ways, it was even more difficult than Crime and Punishment or Christmas Carol, because both of those have big, meaty ideas in them. It's like if you're setting out to write a story about a huge event, it's oddly easier because you have the idea, the magnitude of the idea. But something that is frothy, that's why, a souffle, like you got to beat it or however long, I don't even know how to do meringue, right? You have to beat the eggs. But just because you're beating the eggs doesn't mean you're going to get a meringue. You might just get, eggs.
Scrambled eggs.
Scrambled eggs.
But this was figuring out how do we truly make a meringue out of it, and with something enough to say. And at one point we overloaded it and just made it too important, and people got bored. So it's just like finding the right balance. And what we're opening with, in New York now, I think, is a very cool homage to Bram Stoker himself, and it was only in going back to like Bram Stoker, who ran the Lyceum Theatre in London. I never knew that until recently. The Lyceum where the Lion King is, if you've been to London, he was the house manager there. And he was like, he had this long letter writing epistolary relationship with Oscar Wilde and what's his name?
Ben Vereen? I don't know. I'm sorry.
I don't know.
I want to take your ticket. I'm sorry. I'm just imagining in there.
Anyway, there's definitely
Walt Whitman.
Yes, Walt Whitman.
Walt
yes.
Whitman. Actually, I did know it.
It's just the more we read about him, the more it felt very Gen Z to us, and don't put a label on me kind of thing. And we kind of leaned into that a bit, and that's sort of where it landed in a nice way. But it's an interesting phenomenon that like the more that's there, the easier it is to write, to turn it into something. And if it's just an idea or just decorative or just an aesthetic, you've got to create everything. It's why when you're looking for something to adapt into a musical, you want something with the strongest plot, the most robust, muscular plot, because then you can kind of do anything you want with it.
Have you ever watched another director direct your work?
Yes. Yes, once at Bucks County and once in Seattle at the Fifth Avenue for Single Girls Guide. I had written this thing that was like a riff on Emma a la Helen Gurley Brown, and it was like she was like an advice columnist, and Harriet became some girl, like a dental hygienist from Cranston, Rhode Island. He was in one of the readings, actually.
I was?
So yeah, and at Dallas Theater Center, somebody else did it. Yeah. So it's you know what? It is hard. It is definitely hard when you have the answer, or you think you do, and that person is learning it. But it's the same, and I said this to Steve, with actors, just because you know how something will land, you can't really just give the whole answer to an actor all at once, because their brains, just any person like can't digest all of that in a meaningful way. You can if you just need the result once for like a movie, like whisper that line and then you'll put it together into a performance. But if you really want them to understand from the inside out, it's almost like administering antibiotics. So you just give a little bit at a time and just see where that goes, see if it takes root and where they're at, and then give another little bit, and then they're with you, and you're all on the same journey. Otherwise, if you throw too much at someone, they might just sort of turn off. Like in life, right? So that, I forgot what question I'm answering. What am I saying?
Have you seen other people direct your work? The question was... The
Yes.
answer is antibiotics.
I would like to give this audience an opportunity to ask you some questions.
I would love to give the lights an opportunity to stop being so hot. Woo.
It's just you, baby.
I'm wearing a sweatshirt.
So hot. Are you guys hot? Is there any AC in here?
So Danielle is going to pass around the mic, so please.
Do you think there's a Russian psyche that you're tapping into? I mean, most of the Russian novels are tragic epics. I mean, like Shakespeare did comedies and tragedies. Maybe Dostoevsky is the Hardy of Russian. But I'm just wondering, that's a real paradigm shift to go from this tragic epic story to turn it into a comedy.
It's funny that if you do delve into there, a lot has actually been written about Dostoevsky's sense of humor. Right? He's dark. He writes in a dark, sardonic way, and that is a gateway into comedy. Sarcasm at its very root is that. It's like, oh, that's great. My life is just awesome. My house is on fire. I can't feed my family. It's great. And there's something to that. That depressive mentality that I think is both self-aware, but also is funny and relatable to an outside audience because. Everyone understands hopelessness, and that is a human condition, and really anything that is relatable on a human level, I think there is room for comedy in, because it just helps us understand that we're all in the same boat. We all are dealing with the same stuff, and if we can all do that, it brings us together as a community. We can relate to each other in that way, and laughter is a communal form of expression of understanding. So that's how I try to think of it, as how we can make something like this funny and in a way that is still somewhat respectful to the source material. We're never trying to make fun of Dostoevsky or something. He gets a little gloomy, so you can push on that button a little bit. But I think by and large, finding the joy, because no one is depressed all the time. I mean, if you are, I don't know if you could write this whole novel being depressed all the time. It took him too long. And it was very reflective, too. You wrote it, I think, a lot of it in prison. So I think at that point, you got to sort of look at your life and be like, look where I am. Make the best of it,
But I will say, I think there's also a relief and a joy in self-expression, that even if the expression is about despair, if you can put great specificity into the language that you use, it in some ways it lightens your burden, and I think that is the uplift in a lot of this, is just figuring out how to express yourself. And everyone in this always protects the possibility of a happy ending for themselves, no matter who it is. You'll see.
You have another question? Raise your hands if you have another question. Right here.
What's the project you would like to do in the future? The two of you together, what is a project you would like to do? And by the way, this was the most entertaining seminar I've been to.
Oh, wow. I'm honored. We have a few ideas up our sleeves.
We could tell you, but we'd have to kill you. It's interesting because here's the thing. There's stuff that we like and stuff that we would like to do until we do that process. And Gordon didn't tell you that sometimes we go down the string on these things and we do an outline. We get weeks, so much time and energy to get into them, and then we realize this just is not possible. This doesn't work. It won't withhold. The story won't stand. And so any of the things that we might be interested in doing, even if we were to say it now, if we were to start it and it became impossible, then I personally would feel guilty about giving you that answer. So out of respect for you, I'm not going to answer that question.
Stay tuned. Over here, Danielle, in the second row. Oh, right here.
Just
Curious how long you guys have been working together.
Well, that thing at Ars Nova was like 20 years ago.
How dare you? We first started writing together, I think 2014. I think it's about 2013. For about 10 years, we've known each other for about 20 years, but we've been really working together in earnest as writing partners. I've acted in stuff that Gordon has directed several times, and we always would wind up closing the bar together after rehearsals and stuff and chatting. And so I think it was around like 2012 or so when it's been a while.
Yeah, he was a really funny Nathan Detroit in the tour of Guys and Dolls.
But a lousy Adelaide, and unfortunately.
All right, I think we have time for like one more question. Oh.
I have a 13-year-old daughter that is writing stuff, and her friends are performing it at church camp and stuff. What can she do to continue to develop that love and that talent?
Amazing. Keep doing it. I love that you're writing. I assume, do you perform also or just write? That's excellent. And that's the first advice that I give anyone interested in performing is start writing too, because making your own material is like opening your own company. Like this is a piece of intellectual property that you own, and you're figuring out how to tell the story in the way that only you can. So I would say continue to do that, and consider, I'm sure there are, what would be good, like, additional training programs for that? Here at the Globe, there must be, like, for young people for writing.
Not for writing. I don't know, Danielle. Do you have any?
We have our summer Shakespeare studio, in which they do some devising and performing.
It might not be bad to like study a bit of Shakespeare just to have a fundamental understanding of storytelling.
There's also a program called Playwrights Project. Have you heard of them? I mean, there are some pretty renowned playwrights who have come out of that program here, and the Globe hosted it for several years, it's great. You should definitely look into that as well.
There's plenty of places to study, but like in terms of advice, I think that don't be afraid to keep changing the work. Don't be afraid to get under the hood and tinker. And even if it means taking out everyone's favorite line or favorite scene, if it's not serving your story, then it's got to go. So think about it like that. The greatest challenge ever is to tell your story as economically as possible.
Yeah, my favorite quote, and I don't know who said this, is, if I had the time, I would have written a shorter letter. Is that... Who said it? Oh, is it Mark Twain? Probably. Let's give it to him.
I know Miss Sam Clemens. I mean, that's why I didn't know.
But that's the thing, is what he's saying is the hard thing. I mean, I say spew all you want to. My best friend is a writer, and she wrote. She was a TV writer, and she was on Gossip Girl for a long time, and then Supergirl, Gilmore. She did all the girl shows. Basically, she's a girl. But most recently on Supergirl, she ran that show for a few years, and she always used to say, like, if ever I was stuck, she'd say, well, this is not for you, but she'd say, have a glass of wine and spew something, write something bad. Just tell yourself it's going to be bad. So have some bubble gum or cake, whatever you're allowed, and write something bad. Apple juice. And then put it away for a day or two, and then come back to it. And if you find one line that's interesting and sounds unique, and sounds like someone else almost, because sometimes it does. After a while, you get into this zone where, like, you forget where your keys are, and you're writing things, and then you come back to it a couple days later, and you say, "Who wrote this? It's interesting." So embrace that about writing. That part of it is a little bit like losing yourself enough to be connected to your heart.
That was lovely. And with that,
he also told her to drink wine. Just so you know, you're all clapping for that. I heard it.
We all saw it. With that, thank you, Gordon and Steve.
Thank you,
Such a
guys.
pleasure.